June 1063, near the hilltop town of Cerami on the island of Sicily. Roger of Hauteville, a Norman adventurer, leads a force of some 130 knights. Before him approaches an enormous Muslim army of around 3,000 Arab and Berber horsemen. The Muslims are led by the powerful Sicilian Emir Ibn al-Hawas. The emir's goal: to wipe out Roger and his knights. Roger is faced with a nearly impossible situation. He's far from his home country, leading a small force of adventurers. How can they withstand the power of this immense Saracen coalition? But Roger won't back down and prepares his men for the fight of their lives.
"Keep up your spirits, you brave Christian knights,"
cries Roger.
"We all carry the emblem of Christ, and he will not desert this symbol."
Today on Real Crusades History, we'll learn about this incredible showdown between a small force of Normans and a large Saracen army. This battle would not only shape the future of Sicily, but help launch one of the greatest movements of the medieval era, the Crusades. In fact, Roger's stand at Cerami would help define knighthood itself in the Middle Ages. Join us today on Real Crusades History. And remember, there's no greater teacher than history.
This is J. Stephen Roberts, founder of Real Crusades History. I want to invite you to explore King Richard the Lionheart, Saladin, and the epic events of the Third Crusade like never before. In my historical novel, Richard and Saladin, the Lion and the Eagle, Saladin has conquered Jerusalem. In response, Richard the Lionheart leads an army to the distant east. Richard's dedication to God drives him in a ferocious struggle with Saladin's legions. Among Richard's knights is Baldwin de Coudray, eager to fight for Jerusalem. But the war tests Baldwin's convictions when he encounters Stephanie de Saint-Bertain, a young noblewoman who has suffered enslavement by the enemy. Meanwhile, Saladin wonders if he can trust his own brother, the general al-Adil, who harbors his own ambitions to rule. The Lion and the Eagle holds close to the primary source material for the historical events. Here is all the intensity of King Richard's crusade, with riveting, complex characters, vivid battle scenes, and absorbing intrigue. Click the link in the description or the comments below to get a copy today. Available in paperback and Kindle. And now, on with today's topic.
Roger of Hauteville, the son of a minor knight, was born in Normandy, and yet in 1061 he was far away, in southern Italy, where he joined his brother, Robert Guiscard, for one of the great adventures of the medieval era. It was here that Roger prepared to invade Sicily, then a powerful Muslim kingdom. How did this happen? How did this young knight from Normandy end up on this adventure far from home, ready to wage an epic battle in the name of God? We'll learn more in a moment. But first, let's examine the ethos of Roger and other early medieval knights, and how it came to be infused with spirituality. To understand these concepts, we need to go back to the rise of Charlemagne, Charles the Great, King of the Franks, one of the most important Germanic tribes in the post-Roman world. Charlemagne ruled an empire that stretched across Europe, including territories now part of France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Austria, Monaco, Liechtenstein, Italy, Bohemia, Slovenia, and Spain. In the classical Germanic tradition, Charlemagne was a warrior king, leader of a war band on a grand scale. He was also a spiritual leader, the defender of the church who partnered with the Pope. And finally, he was an emperor in the model of the old Roman Empire. Charlemagne's empire became the ideal of the medieval age. The political order headed by a warrior king with his knights at his side, the church as the hearth of the spiritual order, and all of this contained under the umbrella of empire. After the collapse of Charlemagne's empire, this ideal endured. In the mid-11th century, a party of churchmen in Italy, the Gregorian reformers, articulated an ideal of Christendom, with the church as the unifying order. From this party emerged a series of idealistic popes who would articulate the vision of the Gregorian reformers and consequently shape Western civilization. The Gregorian reformers laid out a vision of Christian society, including the role of the warrior elite. Again, we recall the ancient Germanic warband, the model for the emerging Western kingdoms. The king, duke, or count surrounded himself with his warriors, his knights. This was the basis for the high councils that would govern much of medieval Christian society, such as the High Court that ruled the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem. The Arthurian tradition depicts this order as the king with his knights at the round table. The Gregorian popes urged the warrior elite to cease making war on one another and instead turn their swords against the enemies of God, those who threatened the Christian order itself. This builds on early forms of Christian society, stretching back to the days of Constantine and Augustine's just war theory. But now the Gregorian reformers articulated this warrior's duty as sacred, even comparable to the mission of monks who waged a spiritual battle. Inter-Christian warfare constituted the ultimate sin of the warrior class, disrupting God's order and leading the armed elite to hell. Rather, Christian warriors must stand together as Christendom's defenders. This ideal found expression in the difficult early centuries of the medieval West, when 9th and 10th century European nobles opposed invading Vikings, Magyars, and Moors. But the Gregorian reformers began to articulate, through the teaching power of the Church, the sacred nature of such activity. Sacred warfare emerged first, not in the Holy Land, but in Spain and Sicily. In 1063, Pope Alexander II issued a bull summoning French knights to join their Spanish brothers in a crusade to liberate Barbastro. Alexander's bull describes
those knights destined to set out for Spain,
and declares,
"We, by the authority of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, relieve them of penance and grant them remission of sins."
This is, in fact, the classic crusade indulgence, which would soon animate the broader Crusades movement. The idea here was that the Crusade of Barbastro would not be waged by Spanish warriors alone, but by their Christian brothers from France, that is, the Kingdom of the Franks, and other Latin Christian regions. Thus, the battle to reconquer Spain concerned not only Spanish Christians, but all of Christendom. The Pope's blessing sanctified the war, heaping its participants with spiritual rewards. Historian Joseph O'Callaghan writes,
"In the past, one might atone for sin by entering a monastery or going on pilgrimage. But from this time on, remission might be gained by taking up arms against the enemies of Christian society."
Historians have debated whether or not the 1063 to 1064 campaign for Barbastro should constitute the true First Crusade, but it certainly played a role in the development of crusading and is often called the Crusade of Barbastro. And this leads us to our featured example of proto-crusading. In the 11th century, Norman knights, led by Robert Guiscard, began conquering Lombard and Byzantine territories in southern Italy, forging this once fractious region into one of Europe's most powerful states. Incidentally, the island of Sicily, off the coast of Italy's southern boot, had 2 centuries prior been conquered by Muslims, and was at the time a powerful Arab-Berber emirate. As he consolidated power in southern Italy, Robert Guiscard dispatched his younger brother Roger at the head of a modest force of Norman knights to take Sicily from Islam. The Normans first captured Messina in 1061, establishing an outpost on the northeastern top of the island. Robert placed Roger in charge of Messina, affording him only 130 knights with which to begin the conquest. From his capital of Palermo, the Muslim Emir Ibn al-Hawas vowed to destroy these Norman intruders. His North African allies, the Zirids, sent a Berber army to Sicily under the 2 princes Ayyub and Ali, who joined forces with the Emir Ibn al-Hawas. The Muslim coalition amounted to some 3,000 cavalry and at least twice that number in foot soldiers. In 1063, the Muslims marched north, intent on eliminating the Normans once and for all. Roger was in a tough spot. As mentioned earlier, he had less than 200 Norman knights in his army. Now he marched to meet his enemies, leading a cavalry force of 130 horsemen, supported by an infantry of perhaps a few hundred. Nevertheless, Roger was undaunted and positioned his force on the top of a broad slope near Cerami. Wisely, Roger occupied a high position which would limit the advantage of the Muslim numbers and oblige the Muslims to attack upward. When the Muslims arrived, Ibn al-Hawas hoped to overwhelm the Normans with his numbers. The emir launched his attack, but Roger held his position and threw back the Muslim advance. Roger's nephew, Serlo, led a detachment cavalry, which harassed the Muslim advance guard each time they launched an assault. This went on until evening. By now, the Muslim troops were exhausted. Convinced that nothing more could be done, Ibn al-Hawas ordered his forces to withdraw. At this point, the Muslims faced the full power of the Norman cavalry charge. Roger launched charge after charge at the retreating Muslim host. The emir's coalition shattered and broke into a frantic retreat. The Normans proceeded to hunt down and annihilate their scattering enemy. By nightfall, Roger had achieved total victory. Roger sent word to Pope Alexander II announcing his triumph at the Battle of Cerami. The Pope thrilled at this news and sent Roger a papal banner. Pope Alexander declared Roger's mission in Sicily sanctified, and that any soldiers fighting to liberate Sicily would receive a blanket absolution of their sins. Again, a proto-crusade indulgence. Roger, now known as the Great Count of Sicily, continued his efforts, building Christian churches and establishing reform clergy in the cities he conquered. The alliance between the Normans and the reform popes grew stronger. The Pope lauded the activities of the Normans in Sicily, like the Christians in Spain, as the rightful role of Christendom's knightly elite to act in defense of God's order on earth. The reform popes did not reign unopposed. The German emperor defied the reform papacy on church independence and set up his own anti-pope to undermine the Gregorian reformers. Thus, the Gregorian reformers needed strong allies among the warrior elite to realize their vision. The Normans were among their most important allies, as were the Christian rulers of Spain. King Alfonso VI of Leon Castile, who was engaged in a fierce struggle with the Almoravids of North Africa, adopted Roman liturgy in his kingdom, strengthening his ties with the reform popes. His knight, El Cid, defeated the Almoravids on the eastern coast of the Iberian Peninsula, establishing a Christian outpost at Valencia. Here, El Cid sent to the Pope for a reform bishop to lead the Valencian church. The ideas, policies, and alliances of the reform popes laid the groundwork for the civilization of high medieval Europe. What this amounted to was a church that was not ruled by a king or an emperor, but formed a potent nucleus for Christendom. Its influence stretched into many kingdoms, where rulers cooperated with papal policy. This strengthened an idea of Christendom. Increasingly, Europe wasn't simply a collection of kingdoms that happened to share the same religion. It was a confederation with a common allegiance to the Roman Church. The Church itself took on the role of Charlemagne's empire, or the Old Roman Empire, acting as a spiritual empire with the warrior elite still in their role as defenders of the order. The Church's worldview shaped the ideals of Europe's fighting men and began to give form to what we think of as Christian knighthood. Men like El Cid or Count Roger of Sicily weren't just warriors who were Christians. They were Christian warriors, embodying a role in the world as ordained by God. All these concepts were still in their formative stages, but this was the beginning of Crusades ideology. In the Muslim world, thoughtful men recognized this emerging force. The Zengid chronicler, Ibn al-Athir, described the 11th century Christian victories in Spain and Sicily as preludes to the First Crusade. For the Muslims, all the men of Western Europe were described as Franks, and Ibn al-Athir saw the reconquista in Spain, the Norman triumphs in Sicily, and the First Crusade as part of a broader Frankish expansion. He writes,
"The power of the Franks and their increased importance were first manifested by their invasion of the lands of Islam and their conquest of part of them in the year 478, for that was when they took the city of Toledo and other cities of Spain, as we have already mentioned. Then, in the year 484, they attacked and conquered the island of Sicily, as we have also mentioned. Later, they took other parts, as you shall see. When it was the year 490, they invaded Syria."
This is an intriguing passage, for here Ibn al-Athir, from the heart of Islamic civilization in Mosul, noted what historians today now recognize, that the First Crusade blossomed from the Proto-crusades of Spain and Sicily. The conquest of Toledo, referenced by our Muslim author, was achieved by Alfonso VI, patron of El Cid, and represented a devastating blow to Islamic power in the Iberian Peninsula, and a great moralizing victory for the Christians. The Norman conquest of Sicily had been fully achieved by 1091, and it would be the Norman Bohemond, son of Robert Guiscard, who would be chiefly responsible for the First Crusade's victories in Syria.